Are we live?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do I get a feedback about, what all participants are there, etc., or their chats or whatever, or will you read them out to me?
Yeah, all right.
Yes, sure.
A very good evening to one and all present. I, Tamina Das, welcome you all to today's workshop to guide you all about how to face personal interview. Our mentor for today's workshop is Mr. Siddhan Shekhar. He has completed his Masters in Human Resource from Accelerate Jamshedpur and is working as Assistant Manager HR at ITC Private Limited. For the next few minutes, he will be guiding us with today's topic. Before we start, I request everyone to drop in their queries in the live chat box. At the end of the talk, he will be discussing all the questions. Make sure to like, subscribe the channel. Sir, we are glad to have you with us today. Over to you, sir.
Right. So, welcome to everyone to this workshop. So, I don't have a presentation or something like that, mostly because it's usually ends up distracting from what you should actually be paying attention to. People start taking down notes, whereas all of those things that I might put in a PPT, it's always one Google search away. So, I'm not going to do that. I will tell you two things, in fact, three things. First would be when I was a student, when I was still in my undergrad and I was looking to get a job, how did I approach my interviews then? Then, how do I approach interviews now when I'm often on the other side of the table? And thirdly, what I'll be talking about is what are some standard industry best practices that you should follow. So I hope that I'm audible. Now, what um, I'll start off with the first thing. Tamanna, if at any point there's a question or a clarification, just let me know. So I'll start by put the mic near your mouth. Okay. Uh, just 1 second. Is it better now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Okay. Just 1 second. Yeah, I think they should be fine. Is it?
Yeah, sir. Perfect.
Okay. All right. Great. So, what I want to talk about today is I'll start it with talking about how I approach interviews when I
Sir,
was
sorry to interrupt. Your voice is again breaking.
background. I originally am from Patna. I completed my schooling from there. After I completed my schooling, I went to the University of Delhi and completed my graduation in physics from the University of Delhi, Deshbandhu College. While I was working there, I was interning at a startup in my final semester. When I completed my grad, they offered me a job, then I joined on there. I worked there for about 4 months. Just 1 second, please. Hello. Yep, yep. Is it better now?
Yeah, it is better.
Okay. For some reason, I'm getting a feedback in the earphones. I'm gonna put this out. If you have to tell me something, just like write it in the chat. Okay.
Sure, sure, sir.
Right. So coming back to my background, I completed my graduation in physics from University of Delhi, Deshbandhu College. I interned with a startup for in my last term. Then I got a job offer from them, and I ended up joining there. Over there, I was working as a content editor and a marketer. I worked there for about 4 months. Then that startup shut down, and I shifted over to NIC, which is the National Informatics Center. Over there, I was an assistant editor. I was working on their magazine as an editorial assistant and a content developer. Worked there for about 6 months. At that point, I got into Accelerate, and I moved in to get in my MBA in HR from them. This was in 2017. I completed my graduation and completed my postgrad in 2019. During my MBA, I interned with ITC during my summer internships. And post that, I was offered a job by them. And post 2019 July, I've been working with ITC. Right now, I'm working as an assistant HR manager in the Bangalore cigarette factory. I look mostly after recruitment and a few other related managerial profiles like engagement and appraisals and things like that. So that's pretty much about me. So now let's come back because I think I have seen the process across the value chain, so to speak. I have been a student, I have been an interviewer, and I've seen how other people in the industry approach interviews like these. So, um, to begin with, first things first, I'm pretty sure you already have an idea about what you like to do or what your standard process is when you are undergoing an interview. So let me just talk about some of those things. I mean, I'm pretty sure you've heard a lot of these things before. That you need to look presentable, you need to be confident, and you need to be upfront about it and be honest and all of those things. But what a lot of those things don't do is that they don't tell you how to do that. How do you appear presentable? How do you be confident? Because at the end of the day, an interview is a very nerve-wracking process. It's you're putting yourself out there for someone to judge, and based on 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes of a conversation, make a call whether they would be willing to work with you as a colleague. So, and another thing that so often sort of throws all of us off is the fact that there's a very huge power imbalance in that equation. You are going there as in your head. Again, now this is again, I'm speaking from someone who is just in college or even just out of college. You are going in there as a supplicant. You are going there applying for a job, and you're putting them yourself at their mercy that if you like me enough, you'll take me on. Now I think that is where, if that one mental model, if that thought process, if that one framework that you can get rid of, roughly 60% of all your problems would be solved. Because what happens when you're approaching an interview with that mindset, with that frame of mind, is that you end up thinking that, okay, this person has a lot of power over me, and therefore that sort of makes you nervous. Because all of a sudden, every mistake that you make, or every fumble that you have in your sentence, or every grammatically incorrect sentence that you say, you magnify it in your head, thinking that what, this is why I'm going to get rejected. Now, firstly, let's step back a little. Let's understand what is an interview and why do we even hold interviews. Now, if you look at the word interview, it's made of two different words. It's inter and view. Now, everywhere when you look at that word inter, it's always about conjunction between two things. It's an interaction. So it's a communication. It's a give and take between two different people. Now that's exactly what an interview also is. The view, looking at something. View means looking at something. An interview is not only the interviewer looking at you as the candidate, it's also the candidate looking at the interviewer as well as the organization where you're trying to work. Now, when you realize that, you also realize that even you have a lot of power. Now, that power comes from two things. A, we are, to be very frank, we are in a place where good talent is very hard to come by. In the industry, as you go up the chain, as you get to a senior manager or a VP or even some uh, upper middle management kind of levels, there is a dearth of talent because there are a lot of people, and at that point, uh, there is a very fierce competition between organizations. So good talent is always, no organization wants to pass upon good talent. So first things first, an interview is an interaction between you and interviewer. You are trying to impress the interviewer as much as the interviewer needs. I'm sorry. Yeah, is there an issue?
For me, it's clear, sir.
What?
I'm getting it clear. Your sound is clear.
Himanshu sent text right now. Is that, it's okay? All right.
Yes, sir.
I'll keep the text open. I'll keep the chat open only. Okay. Right. So where were we? Right. So an interview is basically an interaction between you and the company, and you are trying to impress the interviewer as much as the interviewer needs to be impressing you. Now that will only happen if you go in with the mental model that you are an asset to the company as much as you want to get a job there. If you go in there as someone looking for a job and not someone as offering your services, you will never feel that confidence coming from within. So first things first, you need to realize going in is that whatever you do, you are also bringing something to the table in terms of your services, in terms of your experience, in terms of your skills that you bring to the table. It's not that someone is doing you a favor by giving you a job. You are contributing something to the growth of the organization, and in return, that organization is choosing to employ you. Now, this I think is possibly the most important mental model that a lot of people need to follow, and this is something that not a lot of people even do. So first things first, this is something that you have to understand. Write it down if you want to, but this is something that you must most definitely understand. Once you have done this, once you understand this, then the way from over here, then it's mostly the technical part of things. How where do you put your hands when you're talking? How do you look presentable? And how do you negotiate things like that? Now those are technical skills. You can learn them given enough time, given the right guidance. You can learn them. But until and unless you have that mental model in place where it's an interaction and it's not an interrogation, till that point, until that happens, you will always feel nervous going into an interview. Now, obviously, some nervousness is good. I'm not saying that you be cocky or you be overconfident, but at the same time, be confident that you are bringing something to the table. You are going there, offering your skills and your expertise and your experience, and in return, the organization is choosing to work with you. It's not the other way around. No one is doing you a favor by giving you a job. That's the most important thing. Having said that, now this is not how I looked at interviews when I was undergrad, when I was an undergraduate student. At that point, I was in the same way that I don't really know anything, and I don't know how to negotiate. What am I bringing to the table? And I'm getting someone is doing me a favor by choosing to hire me. Now, however, what helped me shape that model off was my first internship. So when I was interning in my final year, I was working with the startup, and for there, when I realized that it wasn't like I obviously needed that job, or I needed that internship, and it was something nice to have in my CV and everything. At the same time, I also realized the service that I was bringing to them. I was doing a lot of work in content creation. I was doing a lot of work in client interaction, and I could see the value that I was bringing. And that is something similar that even you will see when you're working. Especially now, for me, it was easier because I was in a startup, and I was, I think, the 738th employee. Whereas if you're working in a large organization with 5, 10,000 people, it's difficult to see the impact that your work is bringing. However, realize that you always are bringing an impact. And once you have realized that, that gives you that confidence to approach interviews in a more professional way. Now, coming down to how I look at interviews now. So now, often I do a lot of non-technical recruitment. I do a lot of recruitment in my factory. Um, I sit in a lot of managerial interviews as well as the first round of screening, so to speak. So now that I am doing that, I realized how different the recruiter's mindset is when coming to an interview as opposed to someone who's on the other side. Now, what is my responsibility as a recruiter? As a recruiter, I am looking at someone who will be a good fit for the job as well as for the organization. Now, a lot of times there are brilliant people who would be very good at their jobs. However, at the same time, they're not team players. They are difficult to deal with. There are other constraints, maybe locational or maybe role based. Maybe they want a higher role, or maybe there's a difference in the compensation and things like that. So I want someone who will not only be good in their role, but also will be a good fit for the organization. Now, what do I say a good fit for the organization? There are different types of organizations and there are different work cultures across organizations. There are organizations which are more formal. There are organizations which are very informal in the way they work. There are other organizations which are somewhere in between maybe. that there are, a lot of startups that are extremely informal. You can choose to work from your home. You can, you know, uh, uh, take time off as and when you please. No one's asking you for your sick days and everything. So it's important that you understand what kind of an organization you're going to interview for. If you're going in for a large conglomerate, obviously things will be a bit more formal, things will be a bit more structured. And the way a recruiter looks at you in that interview is going to be different as compared to if you're going into an early stage startup. For an early stage startup, now this brings me to why there's a difference. When I'm going into a large scale corporation, the work that you do, it's a small part in that, in that whole organization's output. So whatever you do, you will most probably not be interacting directly with, every other person in the organization. You'll be working within your team and you'll be taking care of a small area of responsibilities. On the flip side, however, if you're working in an early stage startup, you'll be working, it's maybe 10, 20, 50 people. So you would be on first name basis with most of those people. Now, what happens during that is that now that informal day-to-day interaction becomes sort of important, because I will be working very closely with you on a day-to-day basis, and therefore I need to know that you're someone I want in my team. I have fun working with you. I connect with you in the way you work. I can trust you. You can be responsible towards your work. So, because of that, the key takeaway over here is that understand the kind of organization you're going to work for. If it's a formal organization, if it's a large organization, understand the role that is being offered to you. Understand the way they work. If you don't know about it, ask the interviewer that what's your expectation from this. And I think that's possibly the first most important thing, because now that's the first thing, that what I am looking as a recruiter. I want someone who will be good for the job. I want someone who will be good for the company. The second part that is very important when I as a recruiter am looking at profiles is that understand the process in which recruitment happens. Now, every time I put out a job requirement, I get maybe anywhere between 100 to 300 to 400 applications for it. And this is true, like, across as you go up, or, as you go into bigger organizations, that number only gets larger. Now, what happens with that is that if I am looking at 100 or so CVs for maybe 5 positions, after a while, those CVs start to meld together. What happens over there is that I am working on, I have people with similar backgrounds, with similar experiences from similar colleges, with similar internships, with similar educational backgrounds. And after a while, it's very difficult for me to differentiate between people. Now, what's your job over there is to be memorable. Because sad as it is, but the recruiter is also human. And everyone has their own limitations. Even I have my own limitations. Now, if you have something that helps you stand out, and you know, mm, after that entire day of interviewing and after that entire day of looking at CVs is over, if I can pinpoint and go, you know what, that guy stands out to me, you have a much better chance of getting a call back for the interview. Or you have a much better chance of me taking an interest in knowing more about you. And for that, what you need to do is you need to be memorable. Now, I don't say like, you do a stunt that you send a CV printed on bright pink paper, or, things like that. What I'm talking about is present your experience and your qualifications and what you have done and what you intend to do in such a way that it makes an impression on me. Either, talk about why you are suited to that job, or tie in your previous experience to that job, or, build an interesting story for me. Because here's the thing, if you just tell me that, I went to this college, these were my marks, this was my internship project, this was my, if I have done a job before this was my job, etc., etc., all of these are facts. And after a while, if I have looked at 100 CVs, I'm not going to remember those facts. However, if you can give me a story that, what, I started with this was my major, that tied into my internship where I did this, that tied into the job where I took what I was doing in my internship and I did this. Or if you were doing something entirely different, how did you take your experience from your internship and your degree and applied it there? All of a sudden I see a story happening, and it's like there is a lot of research on this. It's scientifically proven that people remember stories much better. So whenever you are presenting a CV, that is essentially your first contact with the recruiter, with the organization. When something like that is happening, uh, what you need to do is you need to have a very good story on your CV, and then you need to carry that story forward into that interview. Now, this is a very generic question that gets asked almost in every interview, which is tell me about yourself. Now, here's the thing. Every time I ask you, tell me about yourself, if you tell me the things that are already there on your CV, I have already read that. I don't need to know, what your marks were, what was your which college you're from, what your internship was. I already know all of that. What you're doing right now is that you're wasting time not telling me anything new about you. And whereas this is a very important opportunity for you in two ways. One, you can bring some new information to the table which makes you memorable. Talk about, that one very interesting project that you have done, or talk about, that very interesting experience that you have in your college. For example, let's say you're applying for a social media manager job. So talk about how you have worked with social media in the past, how you have used your experience in social media to drive result for your college fest or your departmental fest or some other startup or even your own personal photography page or whatever it is. And secondly, you get to shape the interview from this one answer. So the way essentially it happens that even the recruiters have some set questions that they want to ask you. A lot of these questions are organic and they are built upon things that you are telling them. So if I come in and ask you, tell me about yourself, and you tell me, you know what, I was the president of my drama society, and my drama society, I did this. More often than not, my next question will be something related to that. That okay, fine. So what else did you do in college? Or it will be something like, okay, so how do you think that is going to help you here? Or depends completely upon your answer. Now, what happens there is that when you use that opportunity, when you use that tell me about yourself wisely, what you're essentially doing is that you're building the course the rest of your interview will take. Now, let's say you are applying for a technical role and you are very good in your technical skills. So go ahead and talk about that, and that will let's say you do not have you have a very um, you don't have a lot of experience in your co-curriculars and your extracurriculars. So over there, what you want to be doing is you want to highlight your technical skills and talk about that. So that way you keep the conversation, you keep that interview in the gamut of technical skills, so that that is your strength and that is what you want to highlight. On the flip side, if for example in my case, I didn't have a lot of technical skills, but I had a lot of things that I had done in my extracurricular life. I was doing debating, I was doing music, I was doing dramatic, I was doing a lot of those different things. So when my interviews happened, that was where I kept the focus, so that I could show that what, I am very versatile and I have worked in and have excelled in a lot of different areas. So essentially, an interview, as I said, it's someone trying to get to know you better, but they can't do that unless you know yourself. So identify your strengths, identify the areas where you like to work, identify the reasons why you are trying to work with that organization. This is also something that I tell a lot of people. When you are in college, you apply, blindly to every opportunity you see, but that usually ends up not working out because two reasons. A, as a recruiter, I can tell whether or not you are genuinely interested in the job. And B, even if I can't tell that, you will not be happy in that job and you will leave very quickly, which makes my life difficult. So I'll think twice before hiring you, because I have that intuition that you might not stick around here for very long. So three things: whenever you are starting to look at a job, you're still in your undergrad. So whenever you're starting to look at your job or look at getting into a new job, understand why are you taking up that job. Understand what is it that you like to do, what your passions are, what you are good at, what you are not good at, and then apply to the jobs accordingly. Not everyone is not a good fit for a job. For example, if you are an introvert, you probably will have a difficult time working in sales. Whereas if you're an extrovert, you'll have a very difficult time working in something like data analytics or backroom operations where you don't interact with people a lot. So identify what your strengths are. For that, I recommend there are a lot of psychometric tests that you can do. There are a lot of tests, a lot of questionnaires like that which you take, which predict what kind of jobs would you be good at. Again, these are only suggestions, these are only recommendations. You don't have to go according to them totally, but they help you get a better understanding of who you are. There's the IBIP Neo, which is a very good test. There's the Big Five personality factor, which is also, it's very commonly used even in across organizations when we are conducting psychometric assessments. Um, Apart from that, there are a lot of other tests also that you can, it's always a Google search away. What that essentially does is it gives you an idea of what all do you like to do, what your personality type is, what are your strengths, and then basis that you can look at jobs. Because a job right out of college, it's always a fresh start, so to speak. Because right out of college, no one expects you to have picked a career, so you can go in any different direction, provided that you can show some experience in there, or at least an inclination towards that. You don't have to say that I want to work here because I've been working in this field for the past 5 years. No, no one expects that from you. But at the same time, if you can understand what you're good at, and show an inclination that, okay, fine, I may not have worked a lot in photography, but I'm interested in knowing and I have a penchant for it. Even a lot of times, even that is enough. So I think that is something that needs to come out clearly in your interview, and that is something that you can't really fake. So I think it's almost half an hour, so I'll just give you a few closing points. Number one, understand yourself, and as long as you are confident with who you are, what you're good at, that will naturally come out in your interview, because that is something that you can't really fake. That's number one. Secondly, an interview is an interaction between two people who are equals. No one is at a higher level than you. They are looking for a service, or they are looking for a person to carry out a particular job. You are offering to be that person. Over here, both of you are equals. That person does not have more power over you. You don't have less power over them. And therefore, when you walk into that interview room thinking that you are equal to the person on the other side of that table, it's you come off as more confident, and even I have a better chance of even I have a better time interviewing you, because I don't have a nervous wreck in front of me who's not asking me any questions, who's not engaging with me, who I can tell that this person has memorized some answers and he's just reciting them off to me. That doesn't help me at all in taking a judgment call where whether you'll be a good fit for my team or whether you'll be a good fit for my organization. So that's the second thing. And third thing is, there are a lot of resources online that you can look at for the technical aspects of it. Where do you want to keep your hands? What are the gestures? What are the body language cues and all of that? But I think obviously it's important to know them. But as long as you are working, you're working with something that you're interested in and you're confident about it, I don't think that you will have to remember those things, that this is where I need to keep my hands. All of that will come naturally to you, because you are you're operating in a space where you are confident and you are interested in what you are trying to do, and that more often than not is enough going into an interview. So I think that covers most of it. I'll take any questions if you have any. Tamanna, are there any questions?
Not yet, sir. I request all the attendees to shoot the questions as soon as possible, if there is any. Sir, till we get any question from our attendees, there is a personal question from my side. So,
Sure.
basically, I am from a non-technical department, and if I am like working in internships which are not particularly technical based companies, so like I have no such early experience or so, like something like that. So if I'm going and sitting for mass companies who recruit non-technical branch students as well, so in that case, what will be my, like when they are asking about tell me about yourself or something generic questions like that, so what will be my answers?
So um, over here, what you're talking about is essentially an entry level role. So for entry level roles, I am usually not hiring for skills. What I'm hiring for is a potential. So in those cases, for example, if you're from a non-technical background and I'm a technical company recruiting from a non-technical background, I'm doing it for two things. One, either I know that at that point, those in that job, those technical skills are not very important. Or two, I think I can train you in those skills. So in both these cases, what I'll be looking at is trainability. I'll be looking at potential, and I'll be looking at a general personality, if you will. I mean, again, that's a very vague term, but I think what I'm looking at for entry level roles is can I work with you, and will you be open to taking instructions? Because what happens in a lot of times is when I'm looking at entry level roles, because I'm training you and because you don't have experience before that, I will be expecting your boss to tell you what to do because you don't know what to do. So in those cases, if you come off as someone who is not willing to engage with people, not willing to talk to people, not willing to listen to what others are telling you, or not take criticism, that is that is essentially not someone I want in that job. So, for someone from a non-technical background applying for a role in a technical company, if it is a non-technical role, so that is those are the things I'm looking at. If, however, it is a technical role, then I would prefer if that person comes in with some experience. It could be a Coursera course. It could be, one of those MIT or CW courses. It could be a project that you have done in that area. Doesn't really even have to be, something very great. But even if you can show a basic aptitude from that area, I know that, it will be easy for me to train you because you have a foundation on which build all of this upon. So I think that is what you essentially need to do when you are going into a role of this kind. Again, this sort of ties back into what I was saying earlier about understand the role what you're applying for. If you are applying for a role which is non-technical, I'm looking at potential. If you are applying to a role which is technical, I'm looking at some prior education and experience that I can build further upon through my training modules, etc. I think that should cover it. You want any follow up on that?
Yeah, thank you, sir. So, right now, I will be taking some questions that our attendees have put forward.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, just a second. I'm just going
Sure.
to the questions. So, first question is that someone wants to know how the freshers can introduce themselves.
Okay. So when you are going into an interview as a fresher, what essentially is happening, you cannot talk about your experience, your professional experience, unless you have an internship. Maybe you can talk about that, but if you don't have that, not an issue. Because the entire idea of going into an interview as a fresher is that you are saying that, okay, I have never worked before, and this is sort of my first job. So over there, if you say that you don't have any professional experience, that's perfectly fine. The recruiter doesn't expect you to have any professional experience. However, you cannot come in and say that I'm a blank slate who has never done anything in my life. When you go in there, you have to talk about what have you done. You may not be any part of any committee. You don't have to be necessarily a part of any clubs or any NGO or whatever. But you must be doing something with your time, right? You might be doing photography, you might be doing music, you might just be watching movies and reading books, whatever it is. Come in and tell the recruiter that, okay, this is what I'm interested in, this is what I like to do, and this, whatever job applying for, how does it tie into what you are doing? And it could be anything. Again, as I said, understand who you are, understand what your strengths are, understand what you are good at, what you like to do, then talk about that. Tell the recruiter that, what, I don't have any experience. I'm not a part of any of the clubs. But in my free time, when I'm not studying or, when I'm not in college, this is what I like to do. And then tie that into this job, as per my understanding, this is what is required of me in this job. And because of what I do in my free time, I think I'm a good fit for this. I think most recruiters would take that as a perfectly good answer.
Thank you, sir. So let's move to the next question. Sir, how can one tell about his or her strengths
Mhm.
so that it does not seems to the interviewer that he or she is boasting themselves in front of the interviewer?
Okay. So every time someone asks you this question about strength, um, they are looking at two things. First of all, it will not come out as boastful because they asked you for it. They asked you what your strengths are. So if you tell them what your strength is, they can't accuse you of being boastful because you're telling them exactly what they asked. However, what I'm looking for is not just a statement of I am honest or I am punctual or I'm hardworking. Okay, but how? I have never met you before. I don't know who you are. If you come in and tell me that you're hardworking, what do I have to go upon that? So over there, what you need to do is you need to relate it back to a story. Again, as I said, stories are memorable. That will also help you in standing out. So there's something known as the STAR framework, STAR. It stands for situation, task, action, result. So when you say I am hardworking, now what you do is that you give a situation. You say that I was the I was a part of my fest committee, and we had to do something within a span of 2 days. So that is your situation. Then you talk about the task. To complete that, I had to do A, B, C, these five things. Then you talk about the action that I did these five things. And how did you do it? Did you like stay up all night? Did you work with other people? Did you work with vendors? Did you work with teammates? Did you work with teachers? Did you work with the administration? What is it? What was the action that you took? And finally, what was the result? So every time you say that, I'm hardworking or I'm intelligent or whatever, you need to follow it up with a story. I am saying that because. So when you tell me that story, I have something to contextualize with. That okay, fine. This person is saying X, Y, Z things, and this person has, he's backing it up with a story, and this story is adequate levels of hard work for me, or adequate levels of intelligence for me, or whatever is that you're projecting as a strength. But you can't just give me three words and then not follow it up with anything. You can't just go, I'm hardworking, I'm talented, I'm intelligent. Okay, how do I believe you? Because the next person and the person who came before you, they also said those random three words. So at the end of it, I just have three words and I don't have anything that supports it. So more than those three words, what I need to you to give me is give me a story about why you think whatever you're saying it's true for you, and why I should consider you given that these are your strengths. I think that should answer it.
Okay, sir. So let's move to the next question. The next question is, sir, how to tackle a question to which we don't have an exact answer.
Um, Say so. Just tell them that you don't know that answer. If now again, there are a couple of different approaches here. If it's a technical question, uh, say that you don't know the answer, but this is the way I would go about in finding out that answer. For example, you are asked about something in, let's say, coding, or you're asked about something related to your subject. If you don't know the answer, say so. It's perfectly fine. But at the same time, show them that you are not giving up, and it's not like that you don't care. Give them that, what, I don't know the answer, but I think this is how I would get to an answer. That is especially important in, something like a guesstimation kind of a question. If someone comes in and tells you that, how many cars are there in your city, in that case, no one expects you to have an answer. But what they're looking for is how do you get about and get to that answer? What's your process for getting to that answer? However, if it's a question like, if it's something technical, something trivial, that, what are different kinds of semiconductors or something like that. In that case, if you don't know it, say that you don't know it. If you know it partially, say that this is the part of it that I know, this is the part of it that I don't know. And just be open about it. It's okay. Matlab, it's not like someone expects you to know everything. It's better to have an answer, But if you don't have an answer, don't waste your and the recruiter's time by going about it in circles. Just say that you don't know it and move on to the next question.
Thank you, sir. Next question is should we keep the good stuff in the resume at the top or a general pattern is fine?
Um, if personally, again, when I am looking at a resume, I would prefer if the good stuff is at the top, but at the same time, it has to make sense. So again, I talked about how you build a story. So if your good stuff is spread across your career, something you did in 2016, something you did in 2012, something you did in 2019, and then something you did in 2009. If you put that up there on the top, it's difficult for me to build a story from it. Which is why your chronological or your reverse chronological form is the most common and most popular format out there, because it helps you build a story. That okay, this person went to this college, then went to this job, then did this, then did this, then did this. What that essentially helps you in doing is, I as a recruiter, is that I have sort of a story the first time I look at that CV. If you have something which is which is very impressive, if you're a national level athlete or something like that, you can highlight it at the top of your CV. But again, different recruiters have different preferences, and you can't cater to all of them because you don't know the recruiter and what that recruiter would like. So I would suggest that your standard MO should be build a CV that you are happy with, then let the recruiter take over. If the recruiter likes that CV, fine. If it doesn't like it, you couldn't have done much about it anyway because you don't know the recruiter. So your uh, end objective should be creating a CV which you are happy with. As long as you can do that, I think you should be fine.
The next question is should we try to act like our recruiters are acting? Like if they are humorous, should we also be humorous?
If you can, so see, the issue over there is, when I'm looking at a person, I need to look at authenticity. If the other person is not coming across as authentic, that's a red signal for me, because all of a sudden I can't trust any of their answers. So, if you are not naturally a very outspoken person, or you are naturally an introverted person, if you try to flip your personality around in that interview room, it's not going to happen. No matter how good of an actor you think you are, it's simply not going to happen. So in those cases, what I would suggest is, be true to yourself. Do what you're comfortable with. If you're comfortable cracking jokes, go ahead and crack jokes. If you're not comfortable cracking jokes, don't crack jokes. But what I essentially need to see, again, it's an interview. I need to understand who you are as a person. If you are, inherently an introverted person, but pretend being very outspoken in an interview, a, I don't get to see the real you, and therefore I can't make an informed judgment. And B, it's always a red signal for me, because no one can fake being an extrovert when they are not that well. So all of a sudden, I don't trust you, and that usually ends up harming you as well. So what I would suggest is, do what you're comfortable with. If you're comfortable cracking jokes, do that. If you're not, don't do that. No one's going to hold it against you.
Thank you, sir. Moving to the next question. The first question is how to convince or deal with the recruiters on a conflicting statement while giving personal interview. The second part is during personal interview, should we completely be honest even if the points are negative?
The second one first, because that's an easier question to answer. There's a difference between honesty and diplomacy. You can be honest, but you can be diplomatic about it. So, for example, a lot of times you would be given a choice between a yes and a no. Um, However, real life is never that simple. For example, let's say I ask you that a client is demanding a bribe, and or this is a simple enough question. If, let's say, I ask you that I need you to choose between the quality of a project and cost of a project, what will you pick? Now over here, if you give an answer like I will pick quality no matter what, or if you say I will pick cost no matter what that tells me to the recruiter is that you do not see the complete picture. And if there is a conflict, you will you will go with what your values or your principles say instead of what is best for the organization, what is best for the project. So over there, I need, at least I would prefer that this next person took a middle ground and understood what that question is supposed to judge. That question is judging if you are flexible, that question is judging if you can see the entire picture, and that question is judging if you can be trusted to take difficult decisions. And in those cases, if you are honest to the point that you come across as inflexible, you'll hurt yourself. But if you're diplomatic, what it tells me is, you know what, this person doesn't, if I'm giving this person two choices, this person will not fall in that trap and he'll explore other choices, because there are always other choices. And when you're working in a professional setting, there are always other choices. So that is what you need to understand, that it's obviously, I'm not saying be dishonest, but don't be honest in a way which makes you come across as inflexible, or which makes you come across as someone who will be very difficult to work with, because that person is not going to compromise no matter what. That is not what you want. What I want as a recruiter is someone who can take intelligent decisions based upon the data that's given to them, and I can depend upon this person to make the correct decision. And that is something that should come across in your interview.
Thank you, sir. Moving to the next question. It's from Sursmit Kumar Shah, and he wants your advice about how research internship interviews take place.
Okay, so there is no set format for any interview. Be it a research internship interview, be it an interview for some other role, there is no set format that this is the kind of interview that will happen. An interview is a very complex, living, breathing organism that evolves in that room as that interview is progressing. However, there are certain things that you can focus on in a research internship interview. Um, Focus on the area of expertise of the person interviewing you, because most internship interviews, they happen with a particular professor, or in a particular college which has a particular specialization in a particular department. So make sure that you're technically strong. Make sure that you can exhibit a quality for research, for written communication, which is very important in research, for technical skills, data analysis, all of those things. Because a research internship is very different from for an interview from, let's say, some sort of sales job, or something which is a more client facing kind of a role. So again, as I said, understand the job that you're applying for. As a researcher, you'll be working mostly with academics in the area of in the area of research, and the research papers and conferences and seminars and all of that. So the skill set that you take, that is going to be relevant to that job, and basis that, do your preparation accordingly. If it's a research interview, it's going to be uh, technical skills heavy. It's going to be heavy on written communication. It's going to be heavy on data analysis and things like that. And that is what you should be focusing on in a research interview. But again, having said that, that is the general overview of it. There might be professors who are looking for perseverance. There might be professors who are looking for creativity. There might be professors who are looking for even communication skills. So understand what that job requires of you, and then do your preparation accordingly.
Thank you, sir. The next question is when one has to elucidate about yourself, how can one say something regarding his or her contribution in his or her college? Because that would be his or her skill, which they would have mentioned in the resume.
Mhm. Let me just read that question.
So
Right.
I'm repeating
So
once
yeah,
again.
I understand the question.
Yeah,
So
okay.
over here, of course, it would be mentioned in your resume, but what would be mentioned in your resume is a single line, or maybe two or three points, that I was the president and I was leading this team of 20 people, etc., etc. What it doesn't tell me is what you learned from that experience. What it doesn't tell me is how that experience changed you, and what it doesn't tell me, what will you bring from that experience to this job. So, for example, you were the team leader at a fest, or you organized a fest, let's say. So what you learned from that is you learned leadership, you learned how to deal with vendors, with other team members, with authorities, and so on and so forth. And then you dived into this job. You know what? This job has in this job I have to deal with different stakeholders, and therefore this is what I'll bring to this job. So essentially, what I'm saying over here is that your resume is not a complete picture of you, it's a snapshot of you. It is your job to flesh out that snapshot in that interview. And that happens when you bring in the stories and the experiences and the education that you got from those, single points or 3 or 5 points that you put on your CV. That is what fleshes out that for me, and that is what helps me understand you better as a person. Are there more questions?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
The next question is, as a fresher for a technical role, what would be the certain skill sets that are needed? I guess there is a little bit connectivity issue from sir's end. Request all the attendees to wait for few minutes and we will be back. While waiting for sir to come back, I would request all the attendees to like and subscribe the channel. Please don't forget. Please do that from that will be great. Yeah, just a few more minutes. We are connecting back with sir.
Yeah. The web is-
Yes, sir. Can you hear
Okay.
me?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. What was the question again? One second.
Yeah, so basically we will take two more questions. So
Mhm.
the question is how to confront the recruiters if I would like to oppose their point of view.
Sure, you can do that. There's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't do that. However, at the same time, um, don't don't oppose it for the sake of opposition. When you're opposing it, have very strong reasons in place why you're opposing that, and make sure that you communicate those reasons. For example, a lot of those times, a lot of the times, the recruiters will challenge you in saying that, what, I don't think you are good for this job, or I don't think, I think you're lying, or I think that you'll quit this job and go do your masters or whatever. In those cases, you can say that, what, sir, I disagree because of, XYZ reasons, because I'm good at what I do, and whatever that might be. Again, you know your reasons better, so just counter them, but with reasons, and be respectful about it. If at the end he insists that, no, you know what, I still don't agree with it, just be okay with it. Say that, all right, sir, I can't. If you disagree, it's okay, sir. That is why that was what my opinion was, and I've shared that with you. If you agree with it, if you disagree with it, that's fine. Those were my reasons, and that's why I would like to stand by what I said. I think that should be enough, and no recruiter would begrudge you for taking a stand which is different from theirs.
Thank you, sir. The last question. Sir, Ruchika wants to know, as a fresher for technical roles, what would be the skill sets that one needs?
So that would actually depend very heavily on the role. Is it a front end role? Is it a back end role? For what technology that role is, and all of those things. So if you know what role it is, then pretty good. You can prepare for that accordingly. But in a lot of cases, you don't know what that role is. In those cases, what you can do is you can have two, three things. You can have a couple of the general skill set which is usable everywhere. So, for example, if it's programming, so you can work on algorithms. If it is, data analysis, so you can have maybe some data analysis projects that you have done, or a general knowledge of statistics and how that applies to analysis and things like that. Essentially, if you don't know what the role is, it's good to show that you have potential. You can learn quickly, you can learn a lot of different things. Because in that case, what I am picking you is for your potential. I think that with some training, with 6 months, 9 months of training, I can make a programmer out of this person. And for me to be able to make that call, you need to show me that I have picked up different things and have gained a proficiency in them over time. That can only happen if you have actually done that. So, pick whatever it is. Pick a technical area, or pick something that you did in your coursework, or pick something else. But what you need to show is that I have a penchant for learning new things, and I am good at it, and I have been able to achieve excellence in those things. Because when you don't know what the role is, that is the most that you can say. So, show general intellect, show general thinking on your feet, common sense, some algorithms that might come up in those questions often. And I think that is your best foot forward, because at that point there are way too many variables. And I think personally, at least, that is the most you can do to prepare for an interview when you don't know what your role is going to be.
Thank you, sir. That's all for today. Thanks a lot for sharing your valuable words with us, and thank you for giving us time. I hope
Sure.
all our attendees have gained all the knowledges they wanted to from this workshop. And yeah, have a nice day ahead, sir. Good
Thank
night.
you. Thank you. All the best. It's a pleasure talking to
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, sir.